Dr. Jade Singleton, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me here, Christine.
Of course, of course. I'm excited and honored to have this conversation today. What I'd love to do, I recently became aware of your work and your background in the last couple of months. I wish I had been aware of your work before that. But what I'd love to do, I'm such a fan. I'm honored you're on. I'd love to give you a chance before we jump right in, a chance to tell your story. Specifically, this is the tough part. In a couple of minutes, could you share a little bit about your career trajectory and what's brought you here today?
Yeah, I find that the older I get, the longer it gets. When we look at our resumes, we're like, why is this 5 pages long? How did I do all this stuff? But to keep it quick and short, I started out in banking. I spent pretty much my entire career in banking and investment banking and strategic transformation, really fun stuff. And then I transitioned into a lot of inclusion work. I did a lot of consulting with NASA, and I consulted with Amazon and just really cool companies. I noticed that there was such an issue with what was happening with Black women. I was losing friends of mine in their 40s. We're leaving behind children largely due to stress related illnesses, like just here one day, gone the next. And this is something that is being documented. The science is behind this, and the facts and the figures are behind it. But what I don't think a lot of folks are seeing is the pain and the aftermath that we're going through, losing women so early in their lives. And so I decided that I would start an organization for losing a very dear friend who left behind 4 children. I wanted to just say, how can we come up with something? How can we develop a collective with a group of women who really are committed to getting wellness, to getting whole, to dealing with the blows that come with being a Black woman at work and at play? And so we came up with IKONI Collective, and from that forged a sisterhood, a really beautiful space to be, and somewhere that I think I can give honor to all the women that we are losing that aren't getting the attention that they deserve. And so when we're thinking about the documentary, which is called 92, I had stumbled across two kind of facts that overlapped. I was looking at some research, and I was seeing rates of burnout at that 88% and also at that 92% of Black women just being, I think one of the studies said, so tired you might not have words for it. And then, of course, we had the 92% that has been touted as Black women voting in favor of Kamala Harris, right? So I thought about that, and I thought about that number, and I thought about the hope ultimately on one side and then this despairing fatigue on the other. And I didn't want to focus so much on that despair and fatigue. I think that's been done ad nauseum for Black women. What I wanted to do was look at stories that were inspiring from women who are leading this work, women who are helping usher Black women through this really crushing period of extreme collective punishment. And I was so excited about the response to this. And it just let me know that I'm in the right place, that my journey really led me to the right place.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Singleton. You did a really excellent job. I didn't know if you could do it telling your story in a couple minutes. There's a lot to share, and there's a lot I wanted to ask you about and unpack. The first question I had, I work with a lot of women who are in this, what I've been describing as this messy middle or inflection point, where they're deciding that what they have been doing isn't the direction they'd like to move forward with, but they haven't yet figured it out. You spoke to this as you were sharing your background, but you started in investment banking and you pivoted to diversity and inclusiveness and all of your work. I'm wondering, was there one moment that you were seeing with your friends, or what made that shift happen for you? Was it one moment or many moments, or just realizing you needed to help and support Black women?
I lost a really close friend to me suddenly, and it devastated me. I had a hard time talking about it. I couldn't really think about it. I'm tearing up now thinking about her. I could not and still can't believe she's gone. So it's almost like I had to do something.
Mm-hmm.
I had to take that energy and do something with it. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew that there was a need and a necessity for this. And so I do think that that really catalyzed this because I was seeing it so much. I was seeing and I myself developed an autoimmune disorder. I was seeing Black women with these horrible rates of things that are just caused by so much stress. Their allostatic loads are so high. And then I think it was when I read coupling that loss with reading a study that was done in, I think it was 2016, that captured that Black women age 7.5 years faster in America, mind you, not, this is just looking at the States, 7.5 years faster than our white women counterparts. And so thinking about that from an environmental standpoint, like just the environment that you're in really caused me to say, is there something that we can do to disrupt this pattern? What if we had more, we like to call it like just in time support? What if we were able to have that? And that's why I think it was that fusion of events that caused me to do this.
Yep, thank you. And we're going to delve deeply into the IKONI Collective and the 92 documentary. Before we jump into that, I wanted to ask you, so for my listeners, primarily women, mid-career women, I had wondered, speaking directly to the person who is listening, who's been, your story will resonate, but who is struggling to be seen or looking for ways to be an ally, what lessons do you hope they take away from our conversation today? What is the big lesson you'd like them to take away?
I would say thinking about stress, and I think that this is what we're calling kind of, we don't have a formal name for this in Black women circles, but they say, different ways culturally, this shift around rest as rebellion, or you might hear like rest as revolution, or, really positioning rest in a different way. I think that that goes across the board, right, for us all, because I think that what's happening is we're noticing the pain and the impacts of stress really. Like not just kind of talking about it figuratively, understanding that walking away from an extremely stressful situation, somewhere where your cortisol levels are just, all over the place and you cannot kind of regulate, is saving your life. So it's more about, I think, now more than ever, that preservation of one's life versus, boy, I just feel like, what was that great book where the woman went to like Bali and she was like, eat, pray, love.
Eat, pray, love.
Yeah, yes. It's like not like eat, pray, love, it's more like I have to save my life. I think taking it that seriously is critical.
You shared recently, and it really caught my attention and it admittedly surprised me. I wish I had known more about the statistics, but you shared that 266,000 Black women were erased from the workforce in just 1 month. You didn't just stop there. You also shared what was the response and reaction to that. And you were very honest and you just said there was no response. There was silence. Can you talk? So why this surprised me, we sometimes admittedly, and I shared this with you, we get into our own bubble. And I've been coming from the world of tech, and the world of tech right now is very, very messy. People are losing their jobs. They're uncertain of what's next. When you posted about 266,000 Black women, I just did not know what to make of that. And I'd love to get your take on what's happening right now in the systems. The fact that 266,000 women were let go, but there was no reaction is just mind-boggling, but unfortunately not surprising. Can you speak to that?
Black women have been impacted by this more than any other women group, but Black women also have always, and when I say always, I'm talking about hundreds of years to right now, been the largest participants in the labor force, meaning we're working more than any other women group in America and always have. And so when we see these kinds of numbers, it's beyond just, this is detrimental. There are whole ecosystems that are tied to this woman, things that she has to do, things that she has to support. in places where systems just will not support her, right? So, if you want to go to, funding for a side venture, I mean, those numbers are like, I think Black people in general, I think it's less than 0.01%. So, there's no real place else to turn. So what we've done is really started to turn to each other. I wasn't surprised that there hasn't been a big outcry or response. I do think that people are very concerned across the board about their families, right? A lot of people are losing work. But I think that the reason why I said it didn't surprise me is it's the same scenario that just keeps getting played over and over again, where there's a scapegoating that takes place, and we're always the ones that are decimated by political backlash. It's been so much of the tearing down of systems, but even when we try to do something for ourselves, the Fearless Fund comes to mind, where Black women literally were just giving money to other Black women to fund their businesses. They were sued out of, they can't even do that. So even helping each other, if it's done at a remotely minuscule level, it is punished. We all deserve to be punished for those attempts.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Talking about the 92 documentary, and I'd like to talk about the excellent work in storytelling you're doing there, but you also have been, what really caught my attention is your crowdfunding right now. Yeah. You're using the Kickstarter platform. Yeah. The word that always comes to mind now, and it's what you've been discussing with the IKONI Collective, the collective power that can come together and still work outside of these systems. And I'm just really curious, speaking to you, as you're saying, as Black women, fundraising, getting the support you need within existing systems. I see your Kickstarter now. You started with an initial goal of 15,000. You've surpassed that. You have a week to go. Can you talk a little bit about first choosing to run the Kickstarter and how you're operating that Kickstarter outside of the traditional systems? What were you doing differently to really make this work?
So I think that it always works when you're speaking to a problem and folks feel like there's not a voice for it. I knew that Black women would support me. They've always supported me. We support each other. And so I knew that there would be interest, and I tested it with friends to make sure that this would be something that they wanted. What surprised me about it was the interest that came about from a lot of allies that wanted to really talk this through, who didn't really know what was going on. So there was a lot more education of the mission and of the Kickstarter than I had anticipated. And I also think it was really important to highlight where that funding was coming from, because our number one donors were Black women, and our number two were Black men, and so there's these intersections of where people might see themselves in this, even though they're not necessarily, this isn't made for Black men, but there's an understanding of what we're going through at some level, and then the interest of allies to understand more. That was of interest to me.
And I wondered, you spoke to when you were setting up and discussing the 92 documentary, it's a story of inspiration and hope and power. And can you speak to, I know you've been speaking to many, many inspiring Black women and hearing their stories and narratives. Can you speak to the story of 92 and how it's evolved and what you've been learning?
So there were women that I definitely wanted to reach out to that were just powerhouses in this space, that were just giving so much of their time to, again, setting something up, something that might be similar to IKONI Collective or something a bit different. Lisa Hurley is tremendous, and she's going to be joining us in this documentary. And she's a co-founder of the Exhale app, which is really teaching about breath work and meditation for Black women specifically. And so women who had dedicated themselves to this work needed to be, I felt, heard and seen as movement leaders. I think we often think about movement leaders as real, like kind of rebel rousing. And that's not what this kind of time in our history is for us, right? But it is a learning. And so what I wanted to do was get women who I thought had mastered some element of this. Maybe it's the breath work. One woman super powerful, super amazing, super beautiful. I reached out to her and I'm like, hey, I really would love it if you would do this documentary. I think you're amazing. And she was like, of course, I'll do it, but I live in Rwanda, right? So like the move, the kind of exodus, and two of the women that we'll be working with and interviewing are not here anymore. So I was hearing that and seeing that kind of more and more. Well, I don't live in the States. And so those stories, I think how you came to the point where, you leave your country, those types of stories of like kind of radical self-protection, I hope is it gives us back or helps open us up more to the fact that we still have our sovereignty, but we have to fight for it.
I'm wondering, Dr. Singleton, and you're right about this, and you mentioned how much you're educating people who are coming to the documentary to learn more and haven't been really immersed in this world. You've said for Black women, the systems have always been against Black women, and there's this moment in time now where the systemic barriers are still there, yet there is this resilience and hope. And sometimes, as you mentioned, it's doing breath work and being present with yourself. Sometimes it's leaving. I'm wondering, in any of the discussions with these powerhouse women, are some of them still trying to figure out whether they want to work within the existing systems, or have they all hit that acceptance that, I need to find a different way?
Yeah. I think that they all have reached some level of, I had to find a different way to spare myself, to save myself. And also, I wanted to be able to give back and be able to have healing together. So, a lot of what people might be seeing, like looking from the outside, looking in, and not being kind of on the inside of our culture, it might seem like there's a couple of different things going on. You might see the line dancing with the fans. You might see, all these different little pockets kind of popping up. But the kind of root of all of that is collective healing. We're literally we're doing things that we've always done, but we have new language, right? We have new science, and we have, I think, new appreciation for different ways of doing things. For instance, it's like, one woman that is in our collective said, I don't breathe. Like, I never learned how to breathe. I breathe like very shallow breaths all day. Like, I'm always holding my breath, right? Teaching Black women literally to rest is something they have to learn. We had an event. It was so amazing. It was awesome. And every time I would we had these beautiful teas and everyone was kind of sitting down and participating in their teas. And I couldn't get Black women to sit down. They were so worried that the woman next to them didn't get their tea yet. Like, well, she didn't get hers. And, well, what are we doing here? And Jade, let me help you with it. I could not, it was hard to get them to not do it. Do not serve. Don't worry about the woman next to you. She's going to be okay. We want you to be able to have an experience. A couple of the women that I'm working with now, Lauren DK, who's amazing, does a lot of somatic healing for Black women. That's one of the things that she constantly has to do and remind them, like, I don't want you to help me. I want you to participate in this. It's the truth. Even me, I have a horrible time with participating. I didn't do any of the exercises. We had a Liberation Path event. I just kind of stood back in case a woman needed anything, a hug, a whatever. And it was funny because my therapist is like, you're kind of like a liberation voyeur. Like, you're kind of watching and creating, but you don't feel like you deserve to participate. And that's literally where we are. Is having to learn how to do that.
You're speaking to this. I'm wondering, as you've been going through the documentary, interviewing the women, seeing these rituals of healing, for a while being on the outside, but recognizing that you would like to be more immersed, has there been anything especially surprising that's come out of the conversations with these women? Coming into the documentary, I'm sure you expected to hear certain themes, but what surprised you most from these conversations?
I think that what surprised me most was the ability for these women to think about their journey in such a clear-minded space, from such a level of awareness. the type of awareness that you can only really have if you've taken the time and invested in really being awake. And that was just riveting to me. They could tell you where their turning point was. They could tell you how they came through this evolution and what it was that they wanted to do next and what caused them to have to take those type of deep introspective pauses. That's another thing that I learned is because you're conditioned and have always been conditioned to take care of everyone else and to put yourself not second, not third, but like at the very bottom of every single list, it can be difficult to take the time to even meditate, to take the time to really get quiet with yourself. And the fact that these women had done that and they were able to kind of receive, and not to sound too woo-woo here, but that they really understood, like, I had to take this time to myself so that I can understand where I need to be going next.
A question I have, and admittedly, this is me projecting a little bit also hearing from other women who are in what they're calling this messy period. I'm thinking about when you've described the 92 documentary, you're very clear about it, that all of these powerhouse Black women have experienced and have stories around, you describe it as betrayal, workforce betrayal, workplace betrayal, systems betrayal. And now when you're speaking to these powerhouse women, recognizing that they do need to pause and rest and take a breath. And I just wonder what you're hearing from these women. They're understanding they've been betrayed by the existing systems. That quiet period has a lot of uncertainty. And I'm wondering, how are these women having confidence there's the other side and hope during this period of rest? Yeah. Rest and self-care and meditation and intention all seems like the right way to get to the other side, but there's so much uncertainty. How do these women move forward and reach that point of, there's going to be another side?
I think honestly, we've always had to have hope, or else we just couldn't have lived through what we've lived through. And I think that hope is there. I think that what was happening was we were getting a bit more hyper individualized as a community. Yeah. And I think what we all kind of have started, and you're hearing it everywhere, community, like I need community. I think that was the big thing. They were able to either find or forge a community to build some of that collective resilience so that if I don't have it today, maybe you have it and I can borrow some of yours, and recognizing that that's kind of the highest order, that we're meant to be in community with one another, and nothing can really come before that. Family, community, that's why we're here.
Yep, absolutely. I did want to touch upon, I just mentioned it briefly, but you have one more week. It's Tuesday, July 15th. What day does your fundraiser, your Kickstarter end? Is it next Monday?
I think it's the 22nd.
Okay, so it's 1 week from today. And you and I had a discussion back to my days at GoFundMe and crowdfunding that we wanted to talk a little bit about how people can help at this point. Obviously, if they would love to be an ally or your message resonates, they can give financially. Yeah, are there other ways you'd like, obviously they can boost and amplify your message. How can people best help and support you a week out with the fundraiser?
Yeah, of course, giving, right? But I think also sharing, and amplifying is huge. You can always find me. I'm on LinkedIn hanging out under Dr. Jade Singleton. But I think one of the best things, and this is really the truth, is I believe wholeheartedly in like prayer and not in like a passing way, right? I think putting those types of positive emotions toward this as we move forward goes so far, because I want this to be beautiful for Black women. I want them to have something that lasts beyond us and what this looks like today. And I want it to feel very, very safe for them. That I want it to be so beautiful. I want it to be so graceful. I want it to feel like solace and warmth. I believe in that power of collective positive thought for sure.
I do too. And back to, we know from the research, looking at GoFundMe and Kickstart, the more people can boost and share and amplify your message, it leads to more funding. So the more people can do that, you're absolutely right. That's why I was thinking about, how do we have this conversation now? How do we get out the word? I would love to talk a little bit more about the current environment around DEI and DEI programs being slashed, and your work in this space, and admittedly doing work to boost women. I'd love to get your take. My reaction was, for a long, long time, just to keep pushing against the systems and trying to fight them. How have you been feeling with the new administration, with the slashing of DEI? I know it's a what has your reaction been, given that you are a leader in the DEI space?
One of the things I think that's important is to understand that these things happen cyclically.
Yeah.
Whenever we're looking at change, whenever we're looking at a social change cycles, we have some of this clawing back. I was not surprised. I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, there's going to be this new executive, or I did all this work and now it's not going to mean anything. I felt more like we've done so much, we've put so much out there, pulled people into positions where they were on the outside, even just making opportunities available. I'm always going to be proud of. I think there was some guilt that a lot of us felt in the DEI space around, I brought people into kind of a burning house, right? I got these opportunities. I got this funding, let's say, for like a really great nonprofit, and now they have nothing. That is very painful. But I thought about it in a different way, and I encourage others to as well. The social change cycle that has kind of started, it can't just be upended out of nowhere. Change doesn't work that way. So I just saw this as America as typical, and that we're going through this additional change cycle, and we have to steady each other and ready each other to manage it.
And when you're thinking now, back to the 92 documentary, you have this successful Kickstarter crowdfunding project. What is your timeline for releasing the documentary?
Yeah, so we're targeting the end of October.
And if you don't mind sharing a little bit of a story that will be coming up in the documentary, so we can get a little bit of a teaser.
I think that thematically, what I have been hearing, and there's some we haven't done the interviews for, but in our exchanges and going back and forth, is having the ability to find out what your true intentions are really stuck out to me. So asking yourself, why am I actually doing this? Before you do anything, one of the women talked to me about that, and I just was like, I've never considered that, but that helped her kind of start her epiphany around really, what is it all for?
Yeah.
What's in listening for that answer that comes to you?
When you were hearing this lesson and this theme coming out from the conversations, and you've been acting in this next chapter, what was your answer to that question with all of the work you're doing? Why are you doing this with the 92 documentary and your collective?
Honestly, the reason I'm doing this is because I felt like there was a gap. I didn't want to see any more trauma troping.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen a counterbalance. Everything that was coming out was doom and gloom. There were some documentaries that came out. They're true and they're wonderful, but they are devastating. And I think one in particular that I won't name, very powerful, very riveting. For Black women, it was like a horror movie. There were some saying, I can't watch it. I just can't. It's too horrible. It's true stories, right? But like, I just can't do it. And what are we supposed to watch? I'll tell you, what's really interesting to me is, and I don't know if Meghan Markle knows this, but maybe she'll watch this. A lot of us loved the Meghan Markle special. Well, I think for that reason, right? Like, I'm just going to watch Meghan Markle take something out of a big bag and put it in a little bag and like make a sun tea or something. It just felt, we want something to make you feel safe or to make you feel as if the world is not ending. Like, we have enough of that. And that's what I wanted to do. I just didn't want to see Black women crying anymore. We're already living it. They know that already.
I had been wondering the backlash around Meghan Markle's work right now. So to hear your perspective as well, were you surprised by the backlash she was also getting? I'm guessing not.
No, I really wasn't surprised by it. I don't think that there's anything that she can really do that will be right. But I only hope that, I believe that things come up at the right time. And I know for myself and like for a couple of friends of mine, it's small, right? This isn't a big, huge thing, but it was just something lovely to see. I know, talking to my best friend, she wants to talk about the baskets, that she made. She's like, I'd love to make you all a basket like that. Something else that we can think about and be in your own kind of feminine space. And for so long, Black women aren't supposed to be that. They're not supposed to be feminine or taken care of or soft in any way. You're just a mule. You're just supposed to work yourself to death and comfort everyone else and be an emotional kind of butler. And so this, just seeing a little bit of beauty associated with us, I want so badly for that to be amplified because I think we need it.
Yeah, absolutely. Another reason I'm not usually happy with the algorithm of LinkedIn. I cannot predict what will come up, but I was thrilled months ago when a mutual connection was sharing your work out, and I was introduced to your work. And as you mentioned, when people come to you asking about 92, there's this element of education you have with many people. And when we were first speaking about your work, you shared with me, I've been doing a lot of work with women in tech, and the tech workplace is a toxic workplace, especially for women of color. And I've been having real conversations with women talking about that trauma in the workplace and how they're resting and escaping. You also shared, I know you have extensive research in gaslighting in the workplace. I was hoping to speak a little bit to that. When we first spoke, you were talking about the current systems and the current power structures in place, and that there are specific roles within those systems designated for Black women. Can you speak a little bit to that, what you've seen and what those roles are and how women are moving away from them?
Yeah, so there are a few roles. One of them is, and they all come out of, the interesting thing about these roles is that they all come out of someone else's imagination. Yeah. They have nothing to do with Black women, and they also typically didn't ever exist. The interesting thing about that research and how it plays out today is that they haven't really changed. So you have a mammy archetype, right? So she puts herself last. The white family that she services comes first. She absolutely hates the husband she's with. That's another thing. She's got a fussy, docile Black male. And so you've got that kind of trope. That, again, was an invention. This is made up. There was no mammy. There was no existence of mammy. That is a figment of imagination. The other one, so how does that show up? It shows up as, again, you're supposed to be an emotional butler. Yeah. So you're supposed to be comforting and kind of coddling of coworkers. You're supposed to be very nurturing and not have any sort of preference for your own family or for your own situation. What we see is there's just constant in the media and in everywhere else. I can point to it and tell you exactly what trope that is. We see it everywhere. You'll see like a Black character. She has no real backstory. Her only mission in life is to help her white friend to get a date, So she gives her lots of sassy girlfriend knowledge. All right. So that's about as far as you can go. The other one is Sapphire, and Sapphire is like more sassy, less nurturing. So she's ignorant, she's loud, she hates Black men. That's the other thing. And so same archetype for the Black male as well, this stupid, docile animal. And so you're not really allowed to evolve beyond that either, right? Like you're supposed to have a witty comeback or some sort of dogged posture or something like this. So that sometimes will show up in an interesting way where you're supposed to all of a sudden become the tough girl in support of your colleagues that might be around you that want you to go in there and give them some of that Black girl sass that you might not even have. Again, Sapphire was an invention in the 20s or something like this. Then you had Jezebel, which is really just this kind of promiscuous woman that was invented in slavery to really say, this isn't white men's fault if you're raped. It's your fault because you are promiscuous by nature. And it also allowed for them to harm younger Black. They say they mature faster, so it's okay to take sexual liberties with her, even though she's 11 or what have you. So those are some of the things that continue to show up, continue to motif themselves. And those are just a couple of examples. The last one I'll talk about is Sadie. Sadie is my very favorite. And Sadie was invented by Black men, really, as a kind of a counter to some of this narrative. She is lovely. She's beautiful. She's very smart. I don't know, Claire Huxtable, right? Yeah. She's a great mother. She is a hard worker. She always has the right thing to say. She's very loving. The way that Black men see their mothers. And so there's all kinds of responsibility that are placed on a woman who wants to act and behave. And there's very specific ways that a Sadie would carry herself. So you have those, and really if you oscillate between them and you have to be able to leverage some of these expectations so you don't step into what's called an expectancy violation, where people get very angry and upset if you step outside those boundaries. I often talk about how, when Black women cry, it can make people very angry. You'd be shocked by the response of annoyance and anger that comes out of that. Well, because it doesn't fit within whatever those small little paradigms are. So those kinds of things that you're trapped into, right, are again prescribed by others and not actually Black women's lived reality.
They're false narratives, right? And I had wondered, Dr. Singleton, as you're talking about this, these are false narratives. They're prescribed. They're not based on reality, but you're speaking to also it's a necessity to know these roles and be aware of them to figure out how to maneuver. I was going to ask you, what is the way forward? I had assumed the way forward is having recognition of the roles, but not stepping into that false narrative. But is that even realistic? As you were describing, you need to know the roles so you understand how others may react consciously or unconsciously.
It can be very difficult because let's say you are a naturally empathetic, nurturing woman. I know women that are like just Mother Earths, that are just that kind, that are that lovely. You just happen to be a very nurturing woman. I think that some of the remedy to that is being able to showcase the multiple sides of yourself. And I also think that it's about figuring out your own way. So what I'm hearing more of, and I'm so glad that we've come to this point, is I just don't want to be defined at all. Let me just take my blocks, go home, and try to live my life where there can be some more complexity around who it is that I am. Within the Black community itself, there's roles there too, but at least they're more varied. You've got your artistic Black woman. There's different types and variations that you can be. That's just more expansive than we see from what's permitted in the dominant society.
Mm-hmm. You've also been shining a light on workplace dynamics, specifically workplace dynamics for Black women and women of color. Your research around gaslighting, can you share a little bit with me what you found in the workplace? It's happening. We know it's happening, but what have you found in your research and what should we look out for?
Yeah. So my research really was around, can people be trained to see where gaslighting behaviors are happening within the workplace? Because that's a very different dynamic than what you might learn like in a one-to-one relationship. They just take on different roles and they actually can be compounded, because to do successful gaslighting in the workplace, the gaslighter needs to incorporate others who are also going to undermine your reality.
Mm-hmm.
There are about 15 different tactics and techniques that we've seen with gaslighting behavior in the workplace. And so what we did was led a training session to see kind of before and after if they were able to correctly identify and pick up on what element of that gray area gaslighting was taking place. And that's the thing about gaslighting. It's very subversive. And so you don't really realize it until, you go home and then you're like, what? And I'm not sure if this is right or if it's me. Those types of questions, or confusion. You leave somewhere and you're just feeling confused. That's not normal. You shouldn't be feeling confused and confounded and like you don't know what you're doing. That erosion can take place over time. So my big finding, I guess, was yes, people can be trained to these kind of gray areas, find them and recognize them and do something about them.
I did want to ask you, we've spoken about a lot. I'm wondering, one question I'd love to hear from you, given the work you've been doing. If you could go back based on everything you've learned in your career and life now and the work you're doing now, and you could speak to your younger self just starting out in investment banking.
Yes.
What are the one or two big lessons you would like to share with that younger self now that you wish she had known?
One of the things I think I would say, because I had a unique experience where I left a position that was very toxic. Mm-hmm. And I went into 2 more roles at 2 different companies that I absolutely loved. I was pretty much the only in those situations, but the team was better as far as valuing me, making sure that I was heard. Mm-hmm. What I would tell, I guess, my younger self is it really comes down to understanding and appreciating your own value. Had I not made that pivot when I was in the more toxic environment, I would not have been able to go on and have a successful career. I had to be able to identify, I only wish I would have been able to do that sooner. And that I was able to tie it to, who I am as a person versus what I produce, right? People are going to treat you how you allow them to treat you. And so I think that would be a big message. And I think as far as life is concerned, I would say don't rush. If I could go back, I would have waited and married my husband 10 years before. I think about it every day. Just thinking about the non-rushing of things and allowing things to happen as they should, that would be a huge one for me. I would say just hold on, stop rushing everywhere. Everything you need is going to come.
This is a theme that I've been hearing in my interviews with women, just the fast pace, the rush, the frenzy to get to the next act or the next destination. Why are women operating that way?
I think honestly, it's our culture. I think that American culture is very much like this. And I think that it's something we're taught very early on, regardless of race, class, or creed. Yeah. It's kind of the cowboy way of life. That again is a fiction, but we kind of have adopted it and live it, kind of the forge forward, it's just you and your gun and you got to get out here and make some stuff happen. Everyone has to do that. I think that what people in general are finding out is I did all of this, right? I went out here, I worked myself to the bone. I don't get the things that I need. I don't get the health care. I don't get any of the stuff that I should have. That should be a natural kind of birthright for me, right? Mm-hmm. I work myself to the point where I don't have any relationship with my kids. Like, why not get the cabin in the woods now?
Yeah.
So I need to buy this. I need to purchase that so I could live a quiet and peaceful and healthy life.
Yeah.
And we miss the quiet, peaceful, healthy stuff along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. I couldn't end this conversation without also telling you a little bit of a tidbit in terms of how the IKONI Collective and the work you're doing is inspiring me and others. I had talked about this messy time that many women in tech are having in business. They hit this period. And I've had so many conversations with women where we continue to see the powerful man rise on their own, that lone genius that just rises no matter what. And your work and the work of others really has inspired me and a group of other ladies, where it's the collective and the experiments we're now running. How do we come together in our brilliance to use that model, but basically game the systems?
Yeah.
The systems aren't set up for many, many groups. They're set up quite well for powerful white men.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
You know,
rather
yeah.
than just being like, oh, the collective piece, is there another way? A lot of people are saying, oh, if we come together, good things will happen. But the way you are taking action to make it happen, you've inspired me and many others in the tech realm as well to think through this. Like, how do we break down these barriers? And
Yeah.
it's gamification.
Yeah, it is. I'll say something that's kind of controversial, but I really believe it. And I think a lot of times women go into spaces like tech or banking, these predominantly male spaces where I've spent my life, right? Thinking that you have to become them. So you might even adopt, like I know women that talk at a lower register. I don't think that trying to be a carbon copy of, Phil or Steve Jobs or whoever it's just, I don't think that's the way. I think that as long as you need to be able to remain authentic, because that's where you're going to be able to come up with the actual ideas and actually be a real actual asset versus a copy of some sort. This is hard though, because you've been in the tech space. So a lot of us have had white male mentors. Like I know for me, those were my first mentors that I would meet with every week and everything. And they would tell me like, Jade, you need to do this and go in there and negotiate your raise and tell them. And so we can start to adopt some of that. And then what you might lose on the other side is where you actually need to be. The creativity, the ability to convene, right? And they've done a bunch of studies on that stuff. The things that women bring into spaces that are predominantly male, right? Adding the value and making sure that that's very clear. That's where we need to become firebrands, owning what we have contributed. The negotiation. I think there was a great study on that. Women really brokering and being able to negotiate. The myth that we don't know how to negotiate or bring two sides together when we literally are the glue a lot of times between these groups. Huge deals there. Yeah, so absolutely. Elevating some of that instead of trying to morph into your mentor, I think is important.
Thank you so much for our conversation today. I know my listeners got a lot of value from it. I know my listeners will as well. If my listeners would like to find you and learn more about your work, where should they go?
Great. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn under Dr. Jade Singleton. You can also find us on IKONI, which is ikoni.org.
And they can also look for the 92 documentary.
Yes, you can look for a 92 documentary.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much.
Me too, Christine. Thanks so much.
Jade.